I want to revert to the transitional agreement idea. I entirely take your point about implementation. When we joined in '73, we had 4 years when our tariffs moved to converge with and become identical with the common external tariff. But that was a sort of implementation process. In what circumstances would there need to be a transition, i.e. a period where you're sort of, well, I don't know what a transition involves, but I've been trying to find out from the Mayor of London and Institute Directors without any great success. Have you managed to find out what contents people want in a transitional agreement as against an implementation?
You make a good point, Mr. Lilley. I mean, we have been talking to people about what they would want out of these things, and it does vary. Every single person wants something different. That's part of the issue. Which is why I say that what we need to do is first work out what the end state will be, and then work out whether there is a need, whether there's a disruptive effect of some sort in the change, whether there's a need to allow people to accommodate to that. That's one part of. When I talk about implementation stage, or implementation phase, it isn't just the government implementation, it may also be corporate implementation as well. But we may need to think this through. I mean, this is, bear in mind again, I keep reiterating the committee. The committee quite reasonably asked me for hard answers. Starting a negotiation is sometimes hard to do. But I think it will be on both sides' interest to make sure there's a smooth and orderly transition to the new state, and we will try and do that if need be on an industry-by-industry basis. But again, that is contingent on the Commission's agreement, and more importantly, actually, the Council's agreement.
But just taking tariffs first, you would agree if we start with zero tariffs and end with zero tariffs, it's hard to think of any transitional arrangements that would be needed or even theoretically possible.
Yes, there may be issues relating, let us say, to rules of origin.
Yes.
Right. I mean, you could give me tutorials on this, but let me go through it anyway. If we get what we're sort of, aiming for in terms of a overarching free trade agreement, of course we cannot become an entrepot for people to go into through the European common external tariff barriers or big loophole. So we will almost certainly have to have rules of origin arrangements, and there will be some sort of inspection arrangement to go with that. That might be, as I was talking before about trusted traders, an electronic arrangement. So I could imagine even in that circumstance there might be a sort of we haven't looked at that in detail yet, but I can imagine it. I'm trying to think, what's the worst case in this context, as we always do here, and that's about as hard as it. But you're quite right, it's not very much of a transition. You might be able to do that in months.
As far as non-tariff barriers are concerned,
that's more of an issue, I think.
Again, but one is as far as the regulatory and standards are concerned, we start with identity. We hope to continue with identity. Therefore, there's no transition there.
Or
but there is a need.
Or equivalence.
Yeah. Well, we start with identity. Well, wherever we start with, we start. We will be on day one after Brexit, where we were on day one before, or -1. But the only thing that we'd have to negotiate, or the principal thing we'd have to negotiate, would be some system when one side or other challenges the other that something they've done diverges from identity or equivalence. So that's what we have to negotiate. Again, how could there be any transition to that? You'd have to negotiate it. You wouldn't sort of negotiate not to negotiate until later.
You're reinforcing my point, Mr.
Indeed,
that the end state determines the transition. If the end state is near identical, then no transition is necessary. This is one of the reasons that there have been people who have argued, well, you must start by getting the transition state established. You can't. Logically, it's impossible. It's the point I made the chairman earlier. You have to get each step established first. And it may well be, if we get a very, very good agreement, which is what we're aiming for, being ambitious about it, then there won't be enormous needs for transition. But we'll see.
Yesterday we had the Mayor of London, who I have to say was both impressive, pragmatic and positive, except when it came to this transitional deal, when he couldn't tell us what he wanted in it. And reflecting afterwards, it struck me that for some people, transitional deal is just a way of saying, let's put off leaving until after the next general election. And for others, it's simply a kind of displacement mechanism It avoids having to think about what the end result is. Though, of course, logically, you'd have to know what the end result is if you were to negotiate a... Have you got a similar impression that not everybody, but some people who are floating the idea of transitional...
Can I start by saying, I don't know if the Mayor told you, I meet with him once a month to discuss these issues. I mean, the last one we had was on the issue of creative industries, you know, where this is all non-regulatory. It's all about country of origin status and so on. And generally speaking, from my point of view, the best answer in most cases, if not all cases, is to get something which does not require transition. Now, the area where, and I think actually now we're where we are. Now we're 9 months on from June 23rd. More and more companies sort of see that, but I think early on people were very. I mean, bear in mind the amount of propaganda on all sides that flew around at that time. People were afraid of what the changes might bring, and so you're right. There was a sort of put it off, and then we can plan for it when we come to it. It's not entirely irrational. And it's not entirely rational for a head of a big corporation to say, "Okay, you're going to change the environment in which I work. Please give me time to accommodate to it, even though I don't know what the change is." Now people begin to think through. They begin to think in the city. I know some of them think, "How can we manage for this either way?" Peugeot last week, the head of Peugeot was saying, "Well, actually, we can deal with what he called hard Brexit. You know, I hate that term, but we can deal with that, or no deal, and we can deal with the deal arrangement." His answer, remember, was setting up supply chains inside the United Kingdom. What's happening over time is people thinking through their responses, and as we do that, the arguments about transition become more rational, more factual, and narrower.
One last point. So, in general, to have a transitional agreement, you'd need to have decided what you were transitioning to.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.